Roll for initiative. We've all said it. It means that things are getting real or the action's about to start. But really, initiative kind of sucks. It takes a lot of time. It disrupts from the flow of the combat. And it makes it almost impossible as a game master to describe the events of a round of a combat in a dynamic fashion, as if things are all happening at the same time. A lot of games have paid lip service to that idea, oh, everything's happening simultaneously. But if you're describing one person's actions at a time, you've already described the people who've moved before him. You don't even know what the people after him are going to do. And so you're kind of describing each person individually, like everybody else is sort of standing still while I move carefully about the battlefield, in a very gentlemanly fashion, taking our turns. Now, original D&D didn't have an initiative. That word was never used in the first 3 books. Chainmail had a D6 roll-off, but that was only for movement order and only in games that didn't have a referee. Gygax added the initiative roll in a strategic review, I think April 75, I'll have to check it, but anyway. Now, without the initiative, combat was resolved in a very deterministic fashion. You had a range. Once you were within a range of an enemy, you were considered to be in that melee range. You were in melee with them. It was 30 feet or 20 feet, depending on which page of the rule book you look at. And outside of that, movement was done by just comparing movement rates. Of course, missile fire was done outside of that too. And once inside that sort of zone, where you're in that melee zone, movement was more general locations. It wasn't, you weren't at a specific spot. You were fighting the ogre or fighting the orcs or hiding behind the altar. And because it's such a small area, you could move from anywhere within the melee to anywhere else. There were no individual per round movement rates in original D&D. So unless something was blocking you, you could go to any other part of the battle. And once you finally made it into hand-to-hand and moved up in hand-to-hand combat, then you would resolve the attacks in the order of the weapon length. So the longer weapon would go first. So if I have a spear and you have a dagger, then you're going to have to cross my spear point, so I'm going to get a stab at you before you can approach me. So that's how it worked. Now, Judges Guild took this idea of weapon length order and they expanded on it. It's in the Ready Ref sheets on page J5. They have a chart called weapon priority. It's not really explained, what it's for. And it's upside down. You start at the bottom and go up for some reason. I'll put a scan of this particular chart in the show notes. So basically they took the weapon length idea and they added in magical attacks and missile attacks. So you would resolve the attacks in the order the longest, essentially, or quickest attacks first, regardless of which side was doing the attack. So first are glance attacks or gaze weapons like a Medusa. Then breath weapons, very low level spells, missile fire, long weapons like pikes and stuff. And then it would go on with shorter and shorter weapons up until the very top, where reading a spell off a scroll was the slowest kind of attack. And you could adjust it for dexterity or use dexterity as a tiebreaker. Now this is the system that ended up in RuneQuest all the way through 3rd edition through the mid-90s. But this was the system that Judges Guild preferred. Daniel Boggs, who wrote Dragons at Dawn, had a flyer from a Judges Guild tournament that says specifically, the initiative die will not be used. So this system actually came out after Gary's initiative rules came in strategic review, but this was the preferred method for Judges Guild. Now there's a third method from Dave Arneson's group, and you see it in Empire of the Petal Throne. And basically that method, both sides would attack. So you weren't really worried about who attacked first. If you killed the monster would still get a death blow against you. So in a sense, the order of the attacks was irrelevant. Now this may seem strange to those who are used to, monsters very kindly falling over when their last hit points gone and, laying perfectly still. But it's probably more realistic. People don't die right away. There's that scene in the old Spartacus movie, where he's painting on the gladiator, this kills, this kills, and this kills slowly, trying to train the gladiators to go for quick kills instead of the long kill where the guy can still fight you. Matt Easton, who trains in European swordsmanship, he's got a bunch of videos. You should probably watch him anyway, but I'll link to one where he talks about double hits and what he calls the after blow. But the essence of it is how important it is in medieval fighting or any kind of fighting, hand-to-hand fighting, to make the attack and then withdraw quickly and defensively, so that, you know, if you make, I stab him right in the gut and he's just whacking on your head, you know, while your sword's in his belly. So making that, trying to avoid that double hit situation. So in the late 70s, if you were playing, you really had 3 choices of how to resolve combat. The Gygaxian die roll initiative system that we're all used to today, Judges Guild's more deterministic method, and finally Arnisonian's sort of carefree, we don't care who goes first method. Of course, until AD&D came and kind of standardized everything. So personally, I use all 3 of these methods. They're these, I'll think of them as tools that, depending on the situation, with an eye towards resolving the combat as quickly as I can and to make it seem as dynamic as possible. So in the simplest case, you know, you've got some orcs charging, the players are charging, you know, I'll just move them both to the middle where they'll meet in the middle and then resolve the attacks in weapon length order. For the case of, you know, some elves, say, shooting at some goblins who are throwing spears at them, I'll have both sides do their attacks and then just resolve both sets of attacks regardless of, you know, who would really go first. Now in Empire of Pendleton, they give a kind of a technique for making this easier, where you're not worried about shooting individual goblins. You just shoot at the goblins, you know, so you're not worried, oh, I'm going to shoot Goblin 2. And basically the way that worked was you resolve hits on a group from the monster with the fewest hit points first. So the monster with the fewest hit points gets hit first until he's dead, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. In a lot of the early modules in Monster and Treasure assortments, they'll sort the monster's hit points, you know, highest to lowest. That was primarily done in case you have a random number that show up, so the fewer that show up will be the tougher ones. But it's nice if you're playing this way, then you can just start crossing them off from the rightmost side, you know, the weaker ones first. Now if I'm having some sort of situation where you might have a timing issue, I'll use the attack roll sometimes, you know, in my description of whether or not you know, an attack gets off. So for example, if you have the elves standing still and the orcs are charging, instead of rolling to see whether the elves can get their shots off in time, I'll just have the elves roll their attacks. And if they hit, then obviously they got that attack off and they hit the orc, you know, right as he was coming towards him. But if they miss, then I can describe it in 2 ways. Either they hastily fired and the shot went wide, or, you know, they hadn't finished drawing their bow when the orc was already on them and they had to drop their bow and draw their sword. So I can use that hit or miss to in describing them, you know, not able to get the shot off because they rolled a miss. And I can do that in different situations. Like in, you know, let's say we're playing Star Wars and one of the players wants to jump behind some cover because he sees some stormtroopers. So what I'll do is I'll roll the stormtrooper attack using the modifier for cover, and then depending on whether the stormtroopers hit, so if the stormtroopers succeed in their attack, then I can describe the player, you know, he's running towards the cover, and he gets hit before he makes it. But then if the stormtroopers miss, then I can describe to the player that he's, you know, he makes it into cover just in time as the blaster bolts go flying over his head. So I can use that attack roll to kind of, in describing it as a whichever comes first, you know. So I can use that, you know, to kind of, instead of having to worry about which attack goes off first. Now if there's a situation where an attack doesn't require a die roll, and in D&D spell casting is the primary thing here, then I'll have to add a roll. So let's say we have a situation, we have a wizard, and he's going to cast web on some goblins who are throwing spears. Now in this situation I'm going to cheat. I'm going to roll the goblin attacks first. And if the goblins miss, I can describe to the player, you know, you're doing your incantations and there's spears flying everywhere and you cast the web. Just resolve it and move on. Now if I roll and I see that the goblins have hit, now I describe the situation differently to the player. So, you know, you're doing your incantations and you look up and you see these spears and they're flying straight at you. You've got to get the spell off quickly. And then I'll have them roll. So I'll have the player roll a d6, add his intelligence modifier, have the goblin roll a d6, add a dex modifier if he has one. And so what I've done is 3 things here. First of all, I've moved the die roll, the sort of initiative die roll, to the point at which I'm resolving the actions. Secondly, the player knows the stakes. he knows that he's going to get hit if he fails in that roll. I'm not bothering to roll in the case where he wouldn't have gotten hit. And thirdly, I can customize the die roll to the exact situation. So here I'm using intelligence modifier to determine how fast he can cast the spell. I can use any modifier that I want. And then I've also, because I've pre-rolled the goblin attacks, I can describe the results of the die roll immediately, depending on whether he succeeds. So if he succeeds, then I can say you get this spell off right before the spear hits you, or maybe the spear hits you and you manage to keep your concentration just for enough to get the spell off properly. And if he fails, then he could get hit in the shoulder and the spell goes flying off into the hits the ceiling, or maybe even he casts the spell and the spear hits the spell ball as it's flying through the air and explodes, and that's why the spell fails. So I've got options of how to describe it. And again, quickly as possible, I want to resolve the actions, but I also want to make it seem as if you're casting the spell while you're being attacked, and so while these things are all moving. Finally, if I have movement, a movement issue. So let's say we've got a party and they're in a room and they look down the hall and some new orcs have shown up and they're running down the hall towards the party, and the party's like, oh crap. So they want to rush to the door. The fighters want to rush to the door to try and get him at the doorway before the orcs pour into the room. He can use their superior numbers. So here I'm going to roll a d6 just like before. They know the stakes. They know they've got to get there in order to bottle them up. But here I'm going to use movement rate as a modifier to the die roll. Now, luckily, here in this weapon priority chart, there is some modifiers for movement rate or encumbrance, depending on which you want to use. So I can just look at it here and okay, they're wearing plates, so they don't get a modifier, where maybe the orcs aren't even wearing armor, so they're going to get a +2 or a +3, depending on how fast they can run. So, now, again, we're customizing that die roll to the situation. And finally, one of the things I try to do, and it's not foolproof, but is I'll often roll the monster attacks first, regardless of what order I'm resolving things in, and use the kind of the success, or the, look at the numbers in totality. If I get a lot of high numbers or a lot of low numbers compared to what the players get, I can change the outcome of the battle slightly to kind of make one side seem like it's winning. So in the situation, the players may successfully rushed up to the door, but they roll badly and the orcs roll really well. So then I can describe it. You must make it to the door, and they tell me their attack rolls, and I'm like, well, the orcs easily dodge your attacks and are pounding you with their axes, and you're forced to step back, and they can kind of start to enter in the room. So I can use the kind of totality of the situation to kind of change the outcome slightly, to have the side that's doing well sort of push back the side that's doing poorly. Just to try and, again, try to make it feel as if these things are all happening at the same time. But that's how I do combat resolution, or what I do for initiative or instead of initiative. Give it a try. If you got some combat, maybe you think, oh, this one's going to be easy. Try something different just to kind of change the pace, see if you like it, see if you can't handle it, or whatever, don't like it. But just give it a try. It's not like my previous videos where I'm asking you to redo your entire campaign or completely rewrite a whole new rule set. So just give it a try once or twice, see what you think about it. But there's also one other thing that I want people to stop doing, and it's something that we kind of ingrained in the way we run, and that's sort of the, you see some goblins, roll for initiative, or stormtroopers run around the corner, they see you, yell, there they are, blast them, roll for initiative. Whenever the initiative is rolled, in the player's mind, they're in combat. They're thinking, how do I kill the most bad guys the quickest, or do whatever I need to accomplish. So once you roll that initiative, or once you go into that sort of round structure, the players are thinking combat. But the players may not have considered this a automatic combat encounter. Otherwise, I don't know, it's been plenty of times as a player that the referee says, well, roll for initiative. I'm like, can I talk to the monster first, please? Hopefully to try and get, talk to the monster before, all the rest of the party is, in a bloodthirsty craze to try and slaughter them. So this way, do it this way, get in the habit. So, you describe it. The stormtroopers come around the corner, their leader says, they're there, blast them. What do you do? Ask the players their reaction to some new situation. You know, they may say, oh crap, we draw our blasters and take a couple shots and run for the loading ramp and try to get out of here. But you never know that one time that one of the players will be like, well, I surrender, or hey, I just work here, don't shoot, you know. And then now you've taken a combat, maybe just a pacing combat, and you've turned it into sort of a social challenge or a different type of situation. Now the player's trying to talk his way out of it. You know, hey, they pay me double to fill them up. You know, maybe if you hurry, you can still catch them. It may work. You know, that they may, you know, whatever rolls you use or whatever to determine if it works. Hey, it may work. And they may say, oh, the stormtroopers say, just, I'll get out of here. Of course, it could be a disaster. They could get a stun blast to the face and wake up the next day on the Death Star next door to Princess Leia. But the important thing is to never force combat on the players and always kind of ask for their reaction just to see, because the way you picture the scenario coming, you know, being resolved in your mind may not be how the players are looking at it. So, you know, I guess always give the players the opportunity to do the unexpected. You know, that's what we live for when the players do something really dumb and we can talk about it for years. Or the players do something really dumb and manage to survive despite all the odds you throw at them. That's the things that we like to do. You know, some sort of random pacing combat we're never going to remember. So, yeah, ask the players for their reaction first before you go into combat. I know that combat rules are often inside that sort of initiative bubble. You know, you roll for initiative, then you have your, you know, move actions and your attack actions, or however it's described. But you can do attacks outside of combat. It's not going to kill anybody, or well, it may kill somebody. But, you know, you can start, you know, the monsters could announce their appearance through blasters blowing up around you. You don't have to go into rounds just to shoot at the players, I guess is another way of putting it. So try to do that. See, you know, asking the players their reaction, kind of. Anyway, that's all I got to say about initiative, at least for now. I'll make another video as soon as I can. I'm cranking these out as fast as I can. I got kids to take care of in the summer and everything. So anyway, take it easy.